Hi, I'm Zane Stein with the Astrology Collective, and I'm here to chat with Walter Pullen. Hi, Walter. Welcome.
Hello, Zane. It's good to be with you today.
I'd like to start off asking you a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Yes, well, ultimately, I'm from the world as a whole, as a spiritual being, just like everyone else on this world. But on a more practical level, I'm from the United States in Seattle, Washington. And this is where I was born, and this is the area where I still live today.
I have only warm experiences the few times I've been in Seattle. Except it rained way too much for me. But um, so did you grow up in Seattle?
Yes, I did. I did grow up in Seattle, and yeah, it does rain here a lot, but it's not like it actually gets a low amount of inches per year, but it just has a large number of overcast days per year. So it tends to have a reputation for rain, perhaps more than it deserves. But it's good if you don't want to get sunburned, because then you can
Yeah,
keep out of the sun and have healthy skin.
yeah. I've got a friend on the Vashon Island, and she says she loves it there, except that the weather is perfect for the blackberries to take over her whole property.
Oh yeah, they grow native here, as do apples and a number of other fruits. And so it's yes, I do like blackberries.
So listen, most people when they're children have, something they'd like to be when they grow up. As a child, did you have anything particular that you wanted to be when you grew up that you remember?
Yes, I wanted to be a few things in the process of growing up that led me to where I am today. And the earliest thing I wanted to be was a construction worker, or as I called it, a building maker, because I really like the concept of, creating things or building things. And that was the most obvious manifesting thing I could think of. And then later I got more into more, I guess, more mentally oriented. And then I wanted to be an architect. So by the time I was like in 6th grade, I wanted to be an architect. And that was more, designing. And soon after, then the personal computer revolution came about. And then I realized that computers were a way that you could design things. And so I could really get into computers to help me design and create. And that led me to want to be a computer programmer. And that led into my career for much of my life. And I still am a computer programmer in many respects, although it's now a lot is more of like, what can I do with computer programming? Like, how can I apply it or serve or make the world a better place with computers?
And now you authored the astrology program Astrolog, and you've provided that free on the internet for since 1991, I think. And I want to ask you about that in a minute. But first, how long have you been into astrology, and what drew you to astrology?
Well, I've been into astrology since 1990, basically a year before Astrolog. And basically astrology was just a continuation of a ongoing spiritual path, which is still ongoing today. And yes, it was about becoming more spiritually oriented and learning the different things about spirituality and how we can grow spiritually. And then, part of that is divination. So things like, tarot cards and other things like that. And certainly another part of that was astrology. And astrology I always have appreciated, because astrology has a mixture of both like objective and subjective, or left and right brain. In other words, there's a very much scientific aspect of it, like, how do you calculate charts and draw them and so on. But then there's a very much a spiritual or psychological aspect to it, which is how can you interpret it, or what is the meaning or purpose or energy behind it. And so I really like that union of opposites and bringing them together. And so my spiritual path led me to astrology. And then since astrology really resonated with me, I really started working with that. And then, of course, with my computer programming background, that could lead me into, like, say, working with astrology and astrology software.
Makes sense. Are you self-taught when it comes to astrology, or did you have a teacher?
I'm primarily self-taught. And it basically, the way it came with for Astrolog is that I was in college and I wanted to have and it was like these Unix systems that they had, these mainframes that they're, and I wanted to have an astrology program. But the problem was that there wasn't an astrology program. And so basically it was this, and it's much of the Unix philosophy was that you can have many programs, if they would be available on FTP sites or so on, because that was before the World Wide Web, and they were available for free. And so there's sort of this this free software philosophy, and where people can make things, make games or other things, and then make them available for free. And it was like, well, I want an astrology program. There isn't one. And so basically, well, I guess it's up to me to make one. And so basically I did, and made it available for free. And then that was, and it sort of stuck and remained free once I later became, got a PC, and then with Windows, and then it became, okay, let's make a MS-DOS version, let's make a Windows version, and then it remained free as it moved through its different evolutions.
So I'm going to see if I can.
Oh yeah, and if I can jump in, I also, because I know you were asking about, am I self-taught? That was the thing that made me mention that is that in order for me to create Astrolog, I had to learn astrology in order to do it. You have to know it if you want to share it. And so that meant there was a much of learning as I go. And of course, I'm still learning today. The process of learning and then the spiritual path never stops. And so there's a lot of learning on the way, but I still, although I was never, I wasn't trained in a school or anything like that. Well, I guess there are some like, well, you can get to an esoteric school later on, like Morya Federation, but at least as far as this part of my life, I wasn't really formally being trained, although I did have a number of, like astrology books that I'd get and learn from. And so I can say that, like, for example, a few astrology authors that I appreciate, like when I was very first learning and just getting to know the essence of signs and houses and planets, I really like Stephen Forrest is one of my favorite astrologers, because I really like his clear, picturesque explanations and psychological approach. And Dane Rudhyar, I very much respect, because who is very much also has a really, a leader in astrology in many respects, and also is psychological and even esoteric. And also he suggested the concept of a chart sphere instead of just the chart wheel, which is one of the things that one of Astrolog's prime features that it offers is 3D charts. And those are something that he first described in saying that, oh, there could be eventually an evolution of the Campanus house system that could be used as a basis of a three-dimensional burst sphere. And that's one of the things that Astrolog offers. It's a unique area. And so, yes, Rudhyar I very much appreciate. And then, of course, Alice Bailey, author of Esoteric Astrology and many of the more esoteric books.
I want to see if I can briefly just show people. I've got your chart up from your website here. Let me see if I can. So that's Walter's chart, an Astrolog from his website. So now you can get an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about the program he's been working on for all these years.
Yes, indeed, you can get both an idea of me, myself, because that's my own chart, as well as that's a default image from the most recent version of Astrolog 7.3, which is the 30th anniversary edition of the program, as I call it, because it's been exactly 30 years since the first version of the program became available.
All right, and now the button up. Oh, there it is. All right. Thank you for that. All right, so now astrologers are pretty much detectives, whether they're into just trying to figure out their client's chart or whether they're into astrological research. But you really like puzzles of all kinds. I understand that you have another software called Daedalus.
Yes, Daedalus. And Daedalus is a maze generation program. And it's a relatively extensive program, about the same size as Astrolog, and it's entirely devoted to mazes and labyrinths. And that's another major area of interest in my life, where mazes and labyrinths, there's both the meditative labyrinths you can walk as like a spiritual practice, and then there's maze puzzles that can challenge you intellectually. And yes, and I think that that is there's both, kind of like astrology, there's both an objective and a subjective side to mazes. There's the, making mazes and solving them. And there's also the meaning and how like life itself can be a maze. And, the twists and turns in life are very much like the twists and turns of a maze. So that symbol of a maze, I think, can be very helpful in our lives. And yes, there is some integration between Astrolog and Daedalus. In other words, Daedalus isn't just a maze generation program, but it can like display mazes in 3D, and it's like a little kind of like a 3D rendering engine, somewhat maybe, I don't know, maybe like Photoshop in a way. And so that means Astrolog can create charts in Daedalus 3D format, and then you can load those charts in Daedalus as the rendering engine and then display them and explore them. And so like you can display like a 3D chart sphere in perspective, and then like it can be animating through time, but you can also be flying through space using like the arrow keys, kind of like a game. So it's kind of like can be a more modern interactive approach to astrology, where you can zoom through it or like zoom through a model of the solar system, and which I think are also good to get a visualization of how the planets really are out there, and not just say the representations that we often give them in astrology, say with our 2D wheel charts.
I could see interesting twist focusing on the esoteric side of the chart using that program. I'll have to look into that. Thank you. So when I first met you, and it's been online because we've never met in person, I only knew about your interest in astrology and an astrolog. That was a long time ago, and it's probably more years than I want to think about. But since then, I've seen your involvement with the spiritual path. And for example, you have a Doctor of Philosophy in Esotericism degree from Morya Federation. When did you find yourself drawn to the esoteric path? What first captured your attention?
Well, it was sort of a continuation of the path in and of itself. In other words, you could say like when I was a child, I wasn't really into spirituality at all. And the spirituality became gradually awakened within me as I matured and grew older. And similarly, a spiritual path itself, it can often start out as like just be interested in like personal growth, or how can I become aware, or how can I become more sensitive, or things like that. But eventually there's like a deeper part of where spirituality itself can grow. And then you can get into what I would call esotericism, or like the ancient wisdom, which is more that's like soul-oriented spirituality. And that means spirituality that's not just about like, psychic phenomena or UFOs or things like that, but is more just about our own our own essence of soul within us, as well as quote unquote higher levels of spirituality that go beyond just the the astral plane or whatever. Like there are more deeper levels beyond that. And similarly, it's also beyond just the individual. We can recognize that we have our sense of self, this incarnated self that we have, but on a real inner level, we're all connected, we're all one. And we are all like cells in the body of the earth or the universe on a larger turn of the spiral. And so you can say that esotericism is more the spirituality of both like, group dynamics, like how is the earth as a whole evolving, not just how is me, my individual self, navigating it, but how is the earth itself changing and growing. And also like deeper energies that are beyond even just our own individual soul itself, like, the true essence or spirit or what you might even call divine levels of consciousness and awareness and being.
So a lot of people get into astrology for very self-oriented reasons, or very personality-oriented reasons. And some of them, that's as far as they go. Some discover doorways in astrology to take them much deeper, and they begin to explore more spiritual aspects. And how would you sum up the the esoteric as opposed to the personality? I know that you could probably speak for hours on distinction, but if somebody would just say, so what are you talking about when you say an esoteric path? How would you sum that up?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, yeah, like with astrology, there's sort of like three types of astrology. You can say there's like mundane astrology, which can be completely on like physical events or maybe individual things like when will I find love, or when will I find money, or what year will I get married, or things like that. And then there's more, psychological astrology that's more of the like, how can I grow, or what, how am I becoming more aware, and how can I, develop that? And then at the, so at the high end, there's esoteric astrology, which again deals with more of the energies, more esoteric spiritual energies, as well as group energies. And that's sort of the essence. You could say esoteric astrology is like the astrology of the soul, and not just our own individual soul, but kind of the group soul, or the united energy that we're all a part of.
I know I've read some of the works of Alan Oken, and he has used that focus as a matter of fact, as the title of one of his books, Astrology for the Soul. You've authored a few books yourself, and one of them is entitled Evolution of the Spirit, Our Journey Through the Universe. The title, it says a lot, but tell us a little bit what we would find in the pages of that book if we were to read it.
Oh yeah, Evolution of the Spirit. So yeah, that book, it contains what I call a summary of the path. And that means it contains two primary things. It contains the mechanics of the path, as well as the practices of the path. And so by mechanics, I mean, it describes like the planes, like physical, astral, and then like the mental and spiritual planes above that. Or it describes things like, the root races, and like, Atlantis and Lemuria and our current race and where we're going to go from here. And, things like that, like the mechanics, are understanding the lay of the land of spirituality. And then the other, basically, second half of the book is the practices or philosophies. So we can really understand, like, about, for example, oneness, like how we really are all connected, and how we really are all growing together, or like how we can personally grow, like as both individually and as a group, but really how can we, like, gain control of our vehicles, so to speak, like, gain control of our emotions and thoughts and our body, and direct them toward further growth and service to humanity. So there's basically yeah, those practices, like, so once you know the mechanics of the spiritual world around us, how do we apply them? And of course, and the book also describes divination, forms of divination, like tarot, as well as astrology. And because that is like a both recognizing that the universe around us, kind of as above, so below, and that, that astrology is both a mechanic, but it's also a philosophy that we can, become aware of these cycles and work with them as part of our own spiritual paths.
All right. Are you working on any other books at the moment?
Well, I did do another publication, and that is titled The Labyrinth Oracle, Cards for the Spiritual Path. And that is, again, as the title may suggest, it's about mazes and labyrinths. And it's a divination card deck similar to tarot, like a tarot deck, but it has like more cards and like alternate suits. And it's designed for again, it's sort of like a approach, like when I saw these divination decks, I wanted to make something that is aligned with mazes and labyrinths and its spirituality, but also just what I would find most useful myself working with a divinatory card deck. And so, like, what types of cards would I think would be most useful and most, awakening and inspirational? And so, yes, it's the Labyrinth Oracle, and that's on my website alongside Astrolog, that can be, like, physical copies can be obtained or purchased. And yeah, so that's just another project that I've done that took a number of years to do. And I did that with my sister Kathy, because she is the artist who did the art for all 109 cards in the deck. Well, I wrote designed the system and did the mechanics and the interpretations, and wrote the meanings for the cards.
Cool. It's nice that you can work with your sister. That's really great. All right, so let's discuss the talk you'll be giving for us. Tell us a little bit about what you'll be discussing when you give your talk.
Well, the title of the talk is Spirit versus Matter, Lunar Lords and the Fractal Nature of Esoteric Astrology. And as the titles can often be very descriptive, and I think that one is. In other words, it gets, well, on a practical outer level, one can say, oh, well, it's dealing with planetary moons in a large respect. But more spiritually, it's really wanting to really understand what's going on with that, and what we're getting from it is to first understand when I say the fractal nature, that's about recognizing as above, so below, and first recognizing that we live and move and have our being within the Earth, or within this. The Earth is a being, like a planetary logos, and we have our being within it. But the Earth itself is a chakra or center in the body of the solar system, and the solar system is a greater being. And then the sun itself is a cell in the body of the galaxy, and so on for basically the whole universe. And part of that essence is why we do astrology the way we do. In other words, there's normal sun sign astrology, the classic sun sign astrology. Hey baby, what's your sign? And it's like you can just look at the sun and get something. You can just say something, just saying that, oh, I'm a Scorpio. That you can get a brief, crude idea of just from the term Scorpio. But most astrologers, any astrologer that's worth a name, also looks at the planets. You don't want to just look at the sun, you want to look at all the planets. So let's see where my moon is, and where my Venus is, and where my Jupiter is, and all that. And that gives you a much more detailed picture. And that's recognizing that the solar system isn't just a sun, there's the chakra centers forming it. But similarly, again, as the fractal nature, you can go down further and recognize that there's many things in a planet other than just a point that you plop in a zodiac sign and house. And that's recognizing that planets have, for example, moons and sometimes rings. And those things and the angles and positions of those can give you a much more detailed perspective into astrology. And more spiritually, we've got we as beings, we have kind of our spiritual and our physical natures. And when kind of aiming toward like the sun, or aiming toward like our planet, the planetary logos, and then we get toward the heart of the sun, which gets more spiritual, and then toward divine. So when you go up the tree, so to speak, things get more spiritual. And that means when you go the opposite direction, more differentiated, you tend to get more what you think is material. And so you have sort of the more spiritual energies coming from the sun, and then you have the more material expressions when you look at, like, say, Earth's moon, esoterically, the esoteric meaning of Earth's moon, which is sometimes even called the prison of the soul, like it's because it's material. But of course, materialism doesn't have to be bad. We just don't want it to control us. We want to more direct it and evolve in it and express through it. And so this means we can see these other planets as in a more deeper sense, if you can recognize that, for example, Jupiter is not just a planet, but Jupiter has a number of moons, and the positioning of those moons can give you an idea of how Jupiter is expressing itself. Not just the Jupiter spirit, but the Jupiter, how is it expressing itself, and what parts of Jupiter energy are expressing in what ways. And so basically the talk can allow us to understand the energies, the fractal nature of astrology, and then also about the spiritual and more material energies in play in the universe, as well as in astrology, and then how sort of the star, planet, moon hierarchy can give us a more awareness of those, and then how we can work with those energies to give clearer information about our charts.
So if you were hoping that people would come away with at least one thing they would remember from your your upcoming talk, what do you hope they most get out of it?
Well, if I had to pick one, it would be inspiration. In other words, just the inspiration of recognizing and the awe of just seeing our beautiful world and beautiful universe that it's a part of. And through that inspiration, to be inspired to explore more, explore their charts in a deeper way, and to grow spiritually. So that's the if I were going to sum it to one thing, it'd be that, just to have that energy or that enthusiasm that comes from just recognizing the beauty of our world and our solar system.
That's cool.
And all the things that compose it.
I can definitely see the enthusiasm just when you're talking about it, by the way. Shows in your face. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we finish up our interview?
Well, you mentioned Morya Federation earlier,
Yes.
and that is a place where I have received some formal training. So I was self-taught at first, but then, Morya Federation is an esoteric group that I joined in 2010 and went through their 5-year program, which is where the Doctor of Philosophy came from. And that's a way where I learned more about esoteric astrology and the works of Alice Bailey. So there's been work there. And then one other programming project that I've done is the PIP, or the personal identity profile, which is a esoteric ray test. And I believe you've taken that yourself.
Yes, I have.
And that's a thing that for the 7 rays is an important part of esoteric astrology. So it's not just signs and planets and houses, but that there are rays associated with all 3. And understanding those rays. And so then you can find your own ray chart, just as you can find your own astrology chart. And so there's a program. I didn't design the PIP myself, but I did make a PC program version of it using the data that's somewhat similar to an astrological program, where you can do it, take it, answer questions, and then it can give you at least hints as to what rays are predominant in your life. And so that's another project that is related to the esoteric subjects that might be of interest.
When I took the test, my first thought was, boy, this is a long test. But the results were absolutely amazing. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things. So thank you for making it easier for us to take the test.
Oh, you're welcome.
Would you like to just mention your web address in case anybody wants to drop by?
Yes, it's astrolog.org. And astrolog is basically the word astrology minus the Y. So astrolog.org. And on there is, you can download Astrolog for free, as well as Daedalus, and even there's a pointer to the PIP test. Very good.
All right, well, listen, thank you very much for spending time with me. And I'm going to end the recording. I have something I want to ask you that after the recording, so just stay with me.
Okay, thank you.